All right, welcome back. It's the verdict here on Channels Television, and we're having a very spirited discussion. And Jide was building up to something, and we were all following, and then suddenly. So, Jide, I hope you can take us again.
I'll try to.
Okay. So my question, Jide, we talked about the biggest threat to Nigeria's democracy is voter turnout. Why are the voters not coming out? And Mark, they came out to collect their PVC.
Sorry, NT, before you go there, let's just hop over to Benue State. We need to take our correspondent there, Pius, who has an update for us. Let's just take Pius quickly. What's going on now? Okay, so now they've taken Pius off, but if you can still if you can hear me, Pius, tell us what's going on this evening. Let's try one more time.
Okay, thank you. I am standing here at the Wayomalo World Collation Center in Makurdi, the state capital, where collation from all the polling units where voting took place earlier is ongoing presently. And I spoke with the resident electoral commissioner about an hour ago. He told me that one of the improvements from last elections is that at this moment, 10 local governments out of the 23 local governments are presently doing collation in their various local government headquarters, meaning that in real time we should start getting results at the state INEC head office for the collation center for the governorship elections. Last 2 weeks, we didn't have that. We slept till Sunday. Results were still not forthcoming. And so that's a huge departure and improvement from the previous polls that we witnessed. That's one of the advantages we've had today. And then two, in real time today as well, we had most of the polling units active as at 8 o'clock with elections going on, as it were, accreditation and voting. And we're here to tell you that, yes, a collation is going on. And I have with me this evening a civil society person who went to Mbalom earlier, where polling election materials were burnt down, and she's back in town to tell us what she found out when she visited the place. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, just what exactly did you see when you went to Mbalom earlier?
Well, I went to Mbalom on the assignment to go do observation like I'm doing. But when I got into Mbalom, I saw and heard that the materials that were meant for today's elections, most of them were burnt. And I also got to know that there was a lot of shooting, yes, in the air, not that they hit anyone, but it was from gunshots that they got to scare the electoral INEC ad hoc staff from where they were sleeping in the classroom at the primary school where they were supposed to operate from. And I saw the materials that were burnt, some pieces of them. I also saw the door where they burnt them from. And sadly, the community members said they even knew the people. They could tell who came to do this and gave their reasons. And unfortunately, I didn't get to meet with any of such persons. But there was no election in Mbalom. 10 council wards didn't have election because the materials were burnt.
No. What is the people's resolve? Do they still want to cast this ballot, or will INEC just go on without them? What did they say?
I tell you, Pius, they are very, very agitated. They were very angry. As a matter of fact, when I arrived, it was almost like lynch me. They thought I was one of the persons that knows about it because I came with a Hilux, and for them, Hilux is either government or something. So they were agitated. But when they came down, when I calmed them down, we got to talk, they said to me that all they want is that they want to cast their votes. They want to exercise their franchise. So whatever this government is going to do to bring them the polling materials for them to cast their votes, that is all that they want. They want nothing but want to cast their votes. And very, very angry at what they were saying.
All right, thank you very much. Let me bring you to speed on what is Mbalom voting population like. You have 10 council wards, 10 polling units in Mbalom council wards with almost 6,000 registered voters. This number today were disenfranchised from voting because of the act of the thugs that burned down these voting materials. In Yandev North in Boko, he had about 8,000 plus registered voters who were supposed to cast their vote there today as well. In Taka Mange too, about 583 voters also registered there, could not cast their votes. If you put that together, about 15,000 voters from these three locations were disenfranchised because of act of violence today. But we hope, like the Independent National Electoral Commission has said, that it has rescheduled these elections, that these people will have a chance to cast their ballot in favor of their candidates.
So, sorry, before you go, I didn't quite hear what you said about Gwe East, that area that you reported, you told us about earlier in the day, where all the materials there were also burned. So do you have an update on that? Did you talk to anyone about what's going to happen now?
Well, like she said, the civil society person went there herself earlier in the day. She brought pictures of her talking with the people, the burnt materials and all that. And one of the things she said they told her was that they are resolute, in spite of what has happened. They would want a situation where INEC will bring materials for them to cast their ballot because they want to be part of the process of making new leaders for the next 4 years. And this is the only demand they have. That they could also remember or could also identify people who came to do this action on their community.
Okay, fantastic, Pius. And just the last question to ask you about security this evening. We know it's going to continue and go on perhaps into the night tomorrow. What do you see from where you are?
From where I am, the collation center here in Maloyo ward in Makodi Center is adequately secured with security men from the perimeter to the collation point inside there. So there wouldn't be any reason to fear that there will be breach of security here. But you see, before the elections, there were complaints of over or too much deployment of troops to Benue State. But in essence, when we went out today, it became clear that the deployment weren't even enough because 9 police commissioners were posted to Benue State, but you still have incidences where people would go, shoot in the air, scare voters away, take the ballot materials or burn them down and walk away without a challenge. It means that we need more security to deal with these kind of issues because the actors are not resting on their arse.
A lot, Pius. We'll get back to you again if we have any further updates for us. Thanks a lot, Pius, all the way there from Benue State. You heard what he said about not enough security. I know NT was trying to ask you a question earlier, but just looking at what he has said, I mean, we're talking about over-deployment now. They thought there were too many. They were too little. Why should we continue like this?
Before you answer that question, I think Jide had something to conclude, and we're beginning to forget, you know, where you started. The way you were talking, I remember the question.
That's why I said NT.
Why are the voters not coming out?
One word: reward. What do I mean by reward? So, Ijoma, if you send your boy to school like you're doing, and he gets good grades, what is his reward? Perhaps you get a scholarship. Laddie, your reward for performing excellently during the verdict perhaps will be a bonus or a promotion.
You have witnesses.
and even God uses the reward system. You know, so for instance, the reward for obeying God is, in the long term, it's eternal life. And in the short term, you can get a miracle. Now, why is reward important in voter turnout? The question is, what do voters get when they turn print? What is their reward? Now, the reward for voting should be good governance.
Good governance, yes.
And when good governance fails, then the voter has no incentive to vote. Even though, yes, because voting is not compulsory, it's optional, some people don't vote. But the real challenge we have with low voter turnout is there's no reward that comes with voting. So we've seen voters vote, and the reward has been bad governance. So countries that have faced this challenge as well are starting to look inwards, because a lot of voters also want short-term rewards to encourage them to come out. So a state in the US like Arizona is doing something you could call crazy or creative. They're considering having a lottery on the day of election. And so if you participate in election, you get a number that qualifies you to participate in a raffle draw, Ijoma. Your eyes are looking bright.
I'm just wondering whether they won't be overwhelmed, that we need more security to cope with the amount of people that will serve.
But just consider this. One of the activities that the young Nigerians are involved in today is football betting. So what do you think will happen if we consider having some sort of lottery system that is not partisan, that everybody knows that if you come out to vote, you can get a lucky dip and have a chance to win the jackpot, 1 billion naira. Voter turnout will skyrocket. More people will be interested in politics.
Nobody wins. Another thing will skyrocket.
But again, that is just...
It's just an idea.
It's just an idea that allows us to understand that voters want two things: short-term reward and long-term reward. So sometimes waiting for 4 years has failed the voters because they wait for 4 years and they get bad governance. If today you were to be paid your salary every 4 years, how will you feel? And that is what we're giving the voters. So politicians now have to develop means to ensure that voters get short-term rewards. One way that you could give voters short-term rewards is to organize monthly or perhaps quarterly briefings on what you're doing and how your vote, how you're progressing with the mandate that has been given to you. How many politicians organize monthly or quarterly feedback sessions with their constituencies? And yet...
Maybe the question you should ask is how many of them actually take the feedback to their offices and work with it for better governance to the people? Maybe that should be the question you be asking.
Very few. But what we know is that they take, rather than take feedback, they take money. So today what you find is a high correlation between states that are seeing high levels of violence and states that are collecting lots of money from the federation account.
Indeed. At this point, I think we can welcome and thanks for joining us Dr. Joe Abba in our Abuja studios, the former Director General of the Bureau for Public Service Reform. And of course, I understand he's also a lead representative in Nigeria of DAI. Thank you so much for being with us from our studios in Abuja.
Thank you.
And let me throw it straight at you before we continue. What was your assessment, or what is your assessment of what has transpired today?
There have been a number of issues that we've noticed as part of the CDD Election Analysis Center at the Hilton in Abuja. We noticed that unlike in the presidential elections, most of the polling stations started voting on time. People started voting on time. Election materials arrived on time. The personnel arrived on time. So the voting commenced on time. There were some challenges with the card reader in a number of places, specifically the biometric part. So I went to vote today, and I was able to find my name on the voters register. They were able to insert my voter's card in the card reader, and he read it. The challenge was the biometric. It didn't read my fingerprint. I tried 3 different times with a couple of different fingers. It simply didn't work. So I had to thumbprint the register myself, and then leave my contact details against it. We heard reports of quite a bit of violence in different parts of the country. Violence in 2 local governments in Ebonyi State, some violence in Benue State, and I believe Kogi State as well. We got reports of underage voting in Kano. We got reports of a new phenomenon, actually, where people from the smaller parties are basically, if you like, selling their accreditation to some of the big parties because the parties are only allowed one one agent per polling station. So we noticed that some of the smaller parties were actually giving up their positions to some of the bigger parties. We got reports of allegations of vote trading, I'll call it. So it's because it's both vote buying and selling. In some places, the rates were between 3,000 to 4,000 naira. In some places, it was about 1,500 naira. In some other places, it was even based on a promissory note. So you vote now and then you'll be given some money later. There was also the relatively new phenomenon, new in this particular 2019 elections, of ballot box burning. In the past, we've been used to ballot box snatching and ballot box stuffing, but we started noticing incidents of people burning ballot boxes, which is I think a new phenomenon in these 2019 elections. We also noticed that there was a marked voter apathy. In many places, people simply did not come out to vote. In my polling station in Jabi, Abuja, even the people that came out to sell food had nobody to sell it to. It took me exactly 3 minutes to get accredited and to vote because there was absolutely nobody there. So there was a much lower voter turnout than expected, which is a bit of a shame, actually, because the state government and the State House of Assembly elections is actually that part of governance that is closest to the people, that affects the lives of the people the most. But, we quite often focus very heavily on the presidential elections and not enough on the gubernatorial. So overall, I think the main message was, very low voter turnout, pockets of violence in very many places, incidents of vote buying, incidents of underage voting, but on the plus side, availability of materials, availability of personnel, a peaceful voting process in most parts of the country. That's what we've seen today so far.
Okay, Mr. Lekki, can I bring it to you? Because we got some reports from some people who voted in Kano, for instance, who had said that there was no INEC stamp on the ballot paper and that they had complained about it, and the presiding officer told them that he would just sign and date it and that it would be fine. But they were actually worried about whether those votes would be invalidated. So could you clear it up for us tonight? In cases where there was no stamp from the commission on the ballot paper, but the presiding officer signs and dates it, is that fine?
Well, that is not the procedure. There should be a stamp, and I can't understand why there was no stamp. That is something that should have been flagged, that should have been known ahead of time as a missing item and have it provided by the EO before they actually move from the rack to the PU. So that should have been noticed at the rack level before moving to the polling unit. So I don't see why that will happen. But given that that has happened, you see, once you're at the PU, you're already at a kind of a situation in which you have to be creative and make some decision. And you need some consensus around there. So why it is not the practice, but I will imagine that before the presiding officer can take such a decision, he will make sure all the party agents are there and they are agreeable to a decision that will allow the process to move forward. Then that becomes a decision that is agreeable to the party agents and all the stakeholders that are present at that polling unit. In that case, I suppose they can move forward. But that is highly irregular because that should have been something that should have been noticed at the rack level and it should have been provided. There's a sufficient time at the rack level before they move from the rack to the polling units. So
irregular, as you're saying.
I'm just hearing this from you for the first time. So this is something we have to look into.
Yeah, you say it's irregular, but the question is, will those votes be invalidated? Are they voided votes? That's actually the question.
Well, like I said, I mean, this is an unusual situation. I wouldn't say that they are voided votes. Like I said, I think something that needs to be managed very skillfully. And the way you will manage that is to ensure, because you know, even when you are going to void a ballot, you need to show it to everybody present. and say, are you agreeable that this has crossed the line? They have to agree before you can set aside that ballot as voided. So I will use that sort of creativity to deal with this, in which case that they have to move forward. Every political party agent that is there and security agent or that stakeholder, we have to agree that the presiding officer can sign and date, and they see that it is this is not in violation of anything. It can move forward. Once they sign and date it, and it is counted, it is counted. They can become a matter, subsequently as a post-election matter if it becomes necessary.
We'll take a break at this point, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion. Please stay on with us.